This week's Parasha Mikeitz contains one of my favorite quotes from the Torah, Et chata'ai ani mazkir hayom. Quotes from Tanakh are parts of verses that are taken out of context and used by a public speaker to pepper the speech with Torah ideas, even when something might seem mundane, to help liven and elevate a talk. The quote mentioned before is usually used to introduce a confession to the audience. But how is it used in the Torah? The Parsha starts off with Paro having two vivid dreams. After each dream, Paro woke up with a start and tried to make sense of the dreams, but to no avail. In the morning, he looked to his advisors for help to interpret his dreams, but they too failed to reassure Paro with their answers. At this point, the chief wine steward finally stepped forward to suggest someone, but before revealing who can possibly help, he prefaced it by saying the phrase, Et chata'ai ani mazkir hayom. Today I recall my sins. Furthermore, the chief wine steward made it known that it wasn't just a single deed that was problematic, but multiple actions, as he said, Et chata'ai, my sins, in the plural. This meant that he was confessing to more than one sin. So what two or more sins was he confessing to? The Midrash Rabbah says that the chief wine steward was in particular confessing to two sins. The first sin was that he hadn't fulfilled Yosef's request of him to mention Yosef's unjust plight to Paro with the hope of being set free. The second sin was not immediately reacting to Paro's predicament. When he saw that Paro was looking for a dream interpreter, he hadn't immediately come forward to suggest Yosef as a possibility to help. Rather, he waited until no one else had any ideas and only then stepped forward. He was now confessing and apologizing for taking so long to react when his master was in distress. Bechor Shor agrees with the Midrash Rabbah that the chief wine steward was confessing to two sins. Similar to the Midrash Rabbah, Bechor Shor thought that the chief wine steward was confessing that the first sin was not to fulfill Yosef's request of him. Bechor Shor, however, holds that the second sin was the original misdeed against Paro that caused him to be jailed in the first place, where he met Yosef. The very next sentence is a proof to Bechor Shor's understanding, as the chief wine steward recounted Paro's anger against him and the chief baker, and thereby being placed in jail. In contrast to the Midrash Rabbah and Bechor Shor, the chief wine steward probably did not have Yosef in mind when he confessed that he had sinned. The end of last week's Parsha told that he did not remember Yosef and that he forgot him. Two actions of forgetting. The chief wine steward was not interested in helping Yosef. Yosef was a slave and an outsider. Yosef might have been brilliant and able to interpret dreams, but all that Yosef was to him was a young Hebrew man, an outsider, and moreover, a slave to the chief executioner. In his mind, Yosef was beneath his notice and consideration, and deserved to be in jail. So why should he mention Yosef's plight to Paro? But now, Paro, his master, was in distress and needed his immediate help. As such, he prefaced his revelation with Ani mazkir hayom. Mazkir is an active action, meaning I am actively causing myself to remember what happened because, frankly, I don't want or care to remember what had happened or with whom, but I am remembering and recalling only in order to help my master Paro. Many criticized Yosef for not having had enough faith that God would help to release him from prison, and instead asked the chief wine steward for help. But if Yosef was able to properly read dreams, then surely he was able to read people too. He knew that the chief wine steward had no intention of fulfilling his request. However, Yosef had faith and knew that God would help release him at the right time. To help, Yosef planted the idea in the chief wine steward's mind so that when God was ready, despite the chief wine steward's best efforts to forget and erase Yosef from his memory, he would be the instrument of God's plan and Yosef's salvation. And that time was now, 2 years after being sent to and released from prison. Shabbat Shalom.